Night in the emergency room does not fall so much as it condenses, bead by bead, along the edges of stainless steel and glass. By 2 in the morning, the corridors had narrowed into the kind of silence that only machines are allowed to interrupt. The monitors kept time in green, the vents exhaled their chilly prayers, and the automatic doors rehearsed their single trick of letting the world in whether we were ready or not. I was restocking Trauma Bay 4 when the radio spit out a report that felt too delicate for its static. Pediatric female, 8 years old, abdominal pain and choking episode at home, object ingestion suspected, vitals unstable, 5 minutes out. The words arranged themselves into a corridor through which the entire department moved as one organism. The crash cart nudged closer, suction primed, oxygen checked, pediatric airway kit opened and counted. There is a choreography to readiness. The dance is always the same even when the dancers change. The paramedics arrived carrying a bundle that should have been a sleeping child but was not. She lay curled on the stretcher in that careful way children adopt when their bodies are trying to keep secrets from their faces. A blue cardigan swallowed her shoulders, a cheap plastic bracelet pinched her wrist, and her breath came as if it had remembered something unpleasant. Her name was written crooked on a school ID card inside a tiny backpack with cartoon stars. Her mother followed a step behind, eyes red with the kind of crying that removes color rather than adding it. The report came low and fast. A sudden cough at the kitchen table, a hand to the throat, then a gulping swallow and silence. No beads, no small parts from toys, the mother insisted. Only a pendant the girl had been clutching since a weekend visit with a father who lived somewhere between a promise and a forwarding address. The paramedic's last note hung in the air with a weight it had not earned yet. The girl kept touching a spot just under her sternum with the flat of her hand, as if checking whether the outline of absence had changed shape. We moved without fanfare, because spectacle is expensive and we traffic in economy. Pulse ox clipped and reading a stubborn blue that refused to deepen. Oxygen coaxed into nostrils that flared like small wings. IV placed after one miss because fear makes veins hide. The attending arrived at the edge of the room with the casual severity of men who have learned to store tenderness in their hands instead of their voices. The X-ray plate slid beneath a small back that had never asked to learn the chill of metal. When the image bloomed on the screen, the room stilled into a narrow kind of attention. There it was, nested like a dare behind the shadowed curve of the stomach, a speck of glass shaped into a heart no larger than a thumbnail. It glowed a little against its setting, an ember in a field of snow. The mother's breath became an argument she was losing. When a parent looks at an X-ray, they do not see density and contrast. They see the geography of their own failure. I stood between her and that luminous little trespass, and translated what mattered into the plainest language I could find, not with words, but with posture. We have a plan, my stance said. We are not guessing. We are going to ask the body to give back what it cannot keep. She held the edge of the counter as if counters were invented for this precise purpose. The child watched my face with an intensity that felt ancient. Children become experts in the expressions of adults long before adults notice they are being studied. In the ER, we are taught to divide emergencies into two categories: those that require speed and those that require precision. This one demanded both, the worst kind of arithmetic. The attending called endoscopy, with the voice people use for fire alarms. The gastroenterologist on call spoke through the phone as if his sentences were ropes he threw toward us. Prep was underway upstairs. We would stabilize below until the elevator learned how to be fast enough. The girl's oxygen flirted with the wrong side of acceptable. Her belly guarded itself with a small, stubborn hardness, and a brittle quiet settled into her jaw. I thought of all the small objects children swallow out of curiosity and defiance: the coin, the marble, the button, and understood that this was none of those. This was an inheritance she had mistaken for food. Her backpack sat on the counter, mouth open like a creature mid-sentence. A folded index card peeked out from the front pocket. I tucked it back without reading because boundaries are not optional just because pain makes them seem so. The mother found her voice in fragments, the way light finds its way through blinds. She said Saturdays at the park. She said promises kept in halves. She said the pendant was a gift that had arrived in a paper bag with stale fries and a smell of gasoline. She said the father called it a glass heart because it was pretty and because it told the truth about how some things look whole until you try to carry them. Time thinned to a wire on which we balanced. The girl's hand stayed at her sternum, her fingers measuring breaths as if counting meant control. I told her with my hands what words would have ruined, a humming steadiness that made a path through the air from my palm to her shoulder. The sedative crept into her veins like regret, learning to be useful. Her eyelids negotiated with gravity and lost. The mother kissed a forehead that did not yet know how much it owed to gravity's math. And I thought of all the foreheads mothers kiss, and all the altars those gestures make of ordinary rooms. While anesthesia arrived and the consent forms learned how to disguise terror as signatures, I wheeled the stretcher toward the elevator. The hallway seemed longer in that moment, as if the building had grown extra vertebrae overnight. Every fluorescent panel became an interrogation light. In the elevator, the mirrored walls reflected a small universe. A child asleep without permission, a mother folding hope into origami and trying not to crush it, a nurse who had learned to keep fear where it belongs, behind the sternum, below the collarbone, under the professionalism. Upstairs, the endoscopy suite waited with its tidy violence, monitors winking, scopes coiled like restrained serpents, stainless trays prepared to serve as witnesses. The gastroenterologist met us with a nod that resembled prayer. Preparation is its own ceremony. Warm blankets arranged with the tenderness one reserves for fragile museum pieces. Mouth guards set to protect teeth from the tool that would protect more important things. A small hand tucked inside mine for exactly 3 seconds longer than it needed to be, because some seconds must last longer than others. The mother was ushered to a chair in the corner, offered the holy trinity of hospital comfort: water, tissues, a promise that someone would come speak soon. She accepted 2 of the 3 and held the third inside her chest, where faith goes when it is too busy to be eloquent. When the scope slipped past the border guards of throat and esophagus, the room shifted into the kind of silence that contains all the words it will not allow. The monitor offered an interior landscape in soft pinks and reds, a geography most people never see and yet carry with them always. There, glinting absurdly domestic against the living walls, the glass heart waited like a staged photograph. It had caught the last light of a late kitchen, a father's clumsy apology polished into translucence, and then it had fallen where light never goes. The tool advanced with a patience that felt like mercy with better training. The jaws opened, closed, opened again, learning the language of delicate theft. The heart lifted, slipped, lifted, held, tilted toward the path by which it had come. In the moments when an object is neither inside nor outside but exactly at the threshold, the body considers betrayal. A spasm, a cough, a cascade of reflexes old as fish. Anesthesia layered another calm over the first one. The scope withdrew, slow as an apology, trailing the glass with it, a small captured moon. When the heart finally cleared the mouth guard and arrived trembling on the tray, the entire room remembered how to breathe at the same time. The mother's hands found each other and learned how to clasp again. Back in recovery, the child slept with the loose heaviness of the truly exhausted, cheeks flushed with the warmth of blood that had remembered its job. The mother sat beside her and looked at the tray where the glass heart rested inside a specimen cup. No formaldehyde, just air and astonishment. Up close, the pendant was not perfect. A seam ran down its center like a healed fracture. A cheap metal loop sprouted crooked from the top, where a chain had once tried to belong. Inside the glass, almost invisible until the lights struck at the right angle, a rolled sliver of paper sat like a secret tired of the dark. I unscrewed the lid with the gentle disrespect this job sometimes requires, and tease the paper free using forceps I would later log and sterilize and pretend were never part of this story. The paper opened into a sentence written in pencil, the letters too large for the space they were granted. It did not say, "I am sorry," though that was its weather. It did not say, "Forgive me," though that was its gravity. It said something smaller and therefore heavier. It said, "Do not break what you are made of." The mother read it twice without blinking. Then she folded the paper along the crease it had come with and set it back inside the heart as if returning a bird to a nest. She did not cry then. She placed the cup in her lap and looked at her sleeping daughter as if memorizing a password. Downstairs, the ER remembered it had other patients and resumed its relentless generosity. Upstairs, the monitors behind the recovery curtain settled into a lullaby that only machines know how to sing. I charted what charts will allow. Object retrieved intact, patient stable, parent informed, endoscopy without complication. Then, in the place where no one reads but me, I added the part that mattered. A small heart made of glass left a place where nothing made of glass survives, and taught a room full of professionals that some salvations are simple only after they are done. There would be more to learn in the morning when the girl woke and the mother decided how to explain sorrow without inviting it to stay. There would be discharge instructions and soft foods and promises not to wear pendants to bed. There would be all the practicalities that make miracles look like paperwork. But for now the building relaxed a fraction. The elevator returned to its usual height, and the night remembered how to end. Somewhere beyond the parking lot a siren practiced its scales. Somewhere in the waiting room a coffee cooled into confession. In recovery a child slept while a glass heart, rinsed and harmless, caught the light that leaked under the curtain and made of it something almost warm. Morning comes differently inside hospitals. Not as sunlight, but as forgiveness measured in degrees of silence. The night shift dissolves like sugar in black coffee, leaving behind only the ghosts of adrenaline and the faint echo of heart monitors. Room 4 smelled faintly of antiseptic and vanilla pudding, the official breakfast of recovery. The little girl, Lena, stirred beneath her blanket, the blue hospital light turning her skin almost transparent. When she opened her eyes, she didn't speak right away. Her lashes fluttered as if trying to remember the last dream she had before swallowing a secret. The glass heart rested on the bedside table, clean, harmless, but still shining with quiet mischief. Her mother, Caroline, sat nearby, shoulders slumped forward, face hollowed by too many hours of fear. She looked up only when Lena's small voice cut through the hum of machines. "Did they break it?" The nurse, me, smiled. "No, it's safe now. You're safe." Lena blinked, her gaze falling to the cup that held the heart. "It's my dad's," she whispered. "He said if I ever missed him, I could hold it, and he'd feel it too." Her fingers twitched toward it, but I shook my head gently. "Not yet. The doctor wants you to rest a little longer." She nodded, obedient but unconvinced, the way children agree to things that make no sense in their language. Caroline reached out, brushing her daughter's forehead. "You scared me," she murmured, voice cracked like dry glass. "Why did you swallow it, baby?" Lena hesitated. Her eyes moved to the corner of the room, as if searching for courage. "Because I thought, maybe if it was inside me, he'd have to come back." The words settled in the air like dust. Soft, visible, impossible to sweep away. Caroline's hands froze in midair. Every muscle locked between fury and heartbreak. There were so many sentences that wanted to be born in that moment. All the explanations, all the anger, all the years of waiting, but none of them survived the silence. She only said, "Oh, honey," and then couldn't finish. I stepped closer, gently taking Lena's vitals, pretending not to hear what I'd already heard too deeply. In the ER, you learn to let stories live between heartbeats, to let them speak without answering. The pediatric surgeon entered, chart in hand, eyes tired but kind. "Good morning, sunshine," he said softly to Lena. "You gave us quite a scare." "Did you fix me?" she asked. He smiled. "You did most of the work. I just helped you give back what wasn't meant to stay." After a few checks, he nodded to Caroline. "She's healing well." She'll need to eat slowly today. And, he paused, lowering his voice, maybe talk to someone when she's ready. This wasn't just an accident. Caroline nodded quickly, tears threatening again. I know. When the doctor left, the room went quiet except for the faint rhythm of Lena's heart on the monitor. It pulsed gently, steady. One of the few sounds that remind you that everything fragile still fights to remain whole. Later that afternoon, Caroline stepped out to speak with social services. I stayed behind with Lena. She asked me if I believed in magic. I told her I wasn't sure. She frowned. But you saw it, didn't you? It didn't break. That means it's strong. Yes, I said. Maybe stronger than it looks. She thought for a while, then whispered, maybe I am too. For the first time since she arrived, she smiled. Small, tentative, but real. That evening, Caroline returned. Her expression changed. She had been crying again, but this time something else had joined the tears. Maybe exhaustion, maybe acceptance. She sat beside her daughter, took her small hand, and whispered, your father called. He's coming tomorrow. Lena's eyes widened. He's really coming? Caroline nodded. Yes. He knows what happened. He wants to see you. Lena pressed the blanket against her chest. Will you be mad if I hug him? Caroline shook her head slowly. No, sweetheart. I'll be here too. When night came, the ward dimmed into half light. The monitors blinked like stars behind thin curtains. I checked on Lena one last time before shift change. She was awake, staring at the ceiling. The glass heart sat on the table, faintly reflecting the monitor's glow. I can hear it, she whispered. Hear what? The glass. It makes a sound. Like when you press your ear to a shell and hear the ocean. But it's smaller. Like a whisper. I leaned closer, listening. Of course there was no sound. Only the hum of the machines, the soft shuffle of nurses, and the long exhale of the night. Still, she smiled. It's okay. I think it's just him saying he's sorry. She closed her eyes and drifted off, her breathing steady, her face finally calm. At the nurse's desk, I looked at her file again. The small handwriting, the line that said foreign object ingestion, and below it, stable, recovering. But there was no chart for what else had been removed that night. Not from her stomach, but from her heart. Before I clocked out, I passed by her room again. Caroline slept in the chair, her hand still on her daughter's arm. The glass heart glowed faintly in the dark, catching the reflection of the monitor. A rhythm of red and green that pulsed like forgiveness learning how to stay. And for a fleeting moment it almost sounded like it was still beating. The next morning broke slowly, pale and hesitant, as if the sun itself were unsure it wanted to look inside a hospital again. The emergency ward was half awake, lights too bright, voices too soft, footsteps carrying secrets from one bed to another. Room 4 smelled of fresh sheets and a child's sleep. Lena sat upright, hugging her knees beneath the thin blanket, her hair tangled and her eyes clear in that way children's eyes sometimes are after surviving something they don't have language for. Her breakfast tray sat untouched. Oatmeal had cooled into resignation. She was watching the doorway as if it might learn to open by itself. Are you waiting for someone? I asked. She nodded. He said he was coming. I knew who she meant, though no one had said his name aloud yet. Hospitals are full of names no one dares to use. Her mother, Caroline, had gone downstairs for coffee, leaving behind a scent of shampoo and unspoken fears. The air in the room felt charged, ready to make room for a ghost wearing ordinary clothes. Around 9, the security guard at the entrance called up to the desk. Man asking for a child named Lena Ruiz. Says he's her father. When he appeared in the corridor 10 minutes later, he looked like someone the world had been folding and refolding for years. His jacket hung loose, his hands unsure of where to land, his eyes the color of sleep deprivation. He carried nothing except a small paper bag with the logo of a diner printed half-faded on it. He stopped outside the room, reading the sign on the door as if the letters might change their mind. I watched him through the glass before stepping forward. You can go in, I said. He nodded, swallowed once, then crossed the threshold like a man stepping onto holy ground. Lena saw him and didn't move. Children learn early how to test reality. Silence first, then motion. Her mouth opened but no sound came. The distance between the bed and the door was less than 2 meters, but it felt as long as all the years between them. "Hi, Bug," he said softly. His voice cracked on the word, that old pet name he hadn't earned in too long. "You came," she whispered. He nodded. "I heard you were sick." "I'm not anymore." "I know." He took another step closer. The paper bag rustled in his shaking hands. "I brought you something." "What is it?" He reached inside and pulled out a small plastic chain with a missing pendant. "The rest of your necklace," he said. "I couldn't find the heart, but I thought—" "It's here," she said quickly, pointing to the table. He turned, saw the specimen cup with the glass heart inside. His breath left him in a shudder. He touched the lid with 2 fingers, almost reverent. "You kept it." "They took it out of me," she said matter-of-factly. "It got stuck." He blinked hard. "I'm sorry, baby. I shouldn't have given you something so small." "It wasn't small," she said. "It was heavy." It had a message. He looked up, confused. Caroline had returned quietly, coffee in hand, frozen in the doorway. He met her eyes and the air turned heavier. Years of unfinished conversations pressed between them like an extra person. She spoke first. "She could have died." "I know," he said. "I didn't know she'd—" "No," she cut him off. "You didn't know anything because you weren't here." Lena's voice broke through the tension. "He is now." That small sentence did what hours of therapy never could. It silenced the anger long enough for grief to sit down between them. Caroline sighed, placing the cup on the counter. "You can stay a while," she said. He nodded, grateful and lost. For the next hour they talked. Awkward words, soft questions, long pauses filled by the beep of the monitor. He told her about the job he'd found fixing HVAC units, about the tiny apartment with the window that looked at nothing but sky. She told him about school, about her favorite teacher, about how she'd learned to braid her own hair because Mom didn't know how. When she finally asked, "Why did you stop calling?" the world tilted slightly. He looked down, rubbing his thumb along the rim of the paper bag. "Because I didn't know what to say anymore. Every time I thought about you, I felt small. And small people don't make good fathers." She didn't understand all of it, but she understood enough to frown. "You can still try." Caroline turned her face toward the window, tears sliding soundlessly. He reached out, and this time she let him take her hand. The small fingers curled around his like roots remembering the soil they came from. After a while she said, "The glass heart still works." He smiled weakly. "Does it? When I hold it, I hear things." "What kind of things?" "Like someone saying not to break what I'm made of." He froze. His throat tightened. "I wrote that," he whispered. "I rolled it up and put it inside before giving it to you." "You did?" He nodded. "I didn't want you to forget that you're stronger than anything fragile." Caroline turned back to them, her face softening. She didn't forget. Maybe that's why she's still here. Silence filled the room again, but it was different now. Warmer, fuller. When the nurse practitioner came to check vitals, Lena was laughing. The sound was brittle at first, then whole. Her father laughed too, a laugh that sounded surprised to be alive. Later, as I passed by their room, I saw him holding the glass heart against the window, letting the sunlight pass through it onto his daughter's face. The light scattered into tiny rainbows across her pillow, dancing like forgiveness made visible. He looked at me through the glass, mouthed a quiet thank you. I just nodded. We never know who to thank for second chances, so we offer them to anyone nearby. That evening, after visiting hours, Caroline stayed behind to sign paperwork. I found her at the desk, staring at the discharge forms. "Do you think he'll really come back?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. "Sometimes people don't come back the way we want them to," I said. "But sometimes they stay differently." through the things they fix. She smiled faintly. That's enough for me. When I checked Lena one last time that night, she was asleep, the glass heart beside her pillow, glowing faintly with the reflection of her pulse oximeter. Her father had left a note folded under it. You don't need to swallow love to keep it. Just hold it, and it will stay. The hallway lights dimmed, and the monitors fell into their nighttime rhythm, a lullaby made of heartbeats. Somewhere, the sound of glass shifted softly in its cup, not breaking this time, just remembering how to shine. Hospitals teach you that forgiveness has mass. You feel it when families arrive carrying it in pieces, when apologies are wheeled in on gurneys, when love shows up late and asks to be let in anyway. By mid-afternoon, the light in room 4 had turned the color of patient corridors everywhere. Too white to be warm, too warm to be clinical. Lena dozed with the stubborn alertness of children who don't want to miss anything. The glass heart sat in its cup on the sill, catching the sun and breaking it into obedient shards. Her father had left to sign a visitor band. Her mother studied the discharge papers like they were a language she once knew and had to learn again in a hurry. The pager on my hip stuttered a new admission, but for once, it wasn't ours. Outside, a transport team rolled past with a teenager who had survived a calculation he'd gotten wrong. Room 4 breathed in, breathed out. The pediatric surgeon rounded again, satisfied with how the body keeps its promises once you've helped it remember them. Soft foods, tiny sips. No jumping, no talismans near the throat. He smiled at Lena, told her the inside of her stomach looked like a pink seashell. She smiled back as if finally believing that her body was not a trap, only a house that could be tidied after a storm. Caroline asked for a social worker, the way some people ask for a map. She didn't want directions to forgiveness. She wanted guardrails. When the social worker arrived, she listened with those exacting, merciful eyes that make grown adults speak like honest children. There had been distance, yes. There had been inconsistency. There had also been work, the kind you do in rooms that smell like coffee and second chances. He had meetings. He had a sponsor. He had a new job rebuilding compressors on roofs that see the weather before anyone else. The social worker wrote without judgment. When she finished, she slid a small card across the table. Family sessions, Wednesdays at 6, first floor, down the hall that pretends to end and doesn't. Lena woke to the small negotiation of a popsicle. Cherry 1. She held it with grave ceremony, a priest with a cheap red wafer, and let it melt reverently on her tongue. Caroline watched the drip like an oracle, searching for omens in each bright drop. Forgiveness sat between them on the blanket, heavy as a bag of coins. Nobody moved it. Everybody felt it. Her father returned in the soft way men return when they aren't sure their presence is still a gift. He had a fresh band on his wrist and an old apology on his tongue. He didn't offer either right away. He stood at the foot of the bed and narrated the weather because sometimes that's how apologies rehearse. Warm front moving in. Rain by evening. The city smelling like summer laundry. He glanced at the cup on the sill and the note beneath it. He did not ask to touch either. Lena asked for the chain. He handed it to her, the plastic clicking with that familiar thrift store rhythm of rescued objects. She threaded it through the pendant loop with the concentration of a surgeon and held the heart up to the window. Sunlight obeyed her. The room lit up in small traveling rainbows. Forgiveness rearranged itself, a little lighter. The ER called me out for an hour that stretched like old gum. A child with a forearm bent at the wrong angles. An elderly woman who sat upright and described chest pain like she was reading a recipe. A man whose hand had not learned the border between rage and drywall. When I returned, room 4 had acquired a quiet not unlike the hush of a chapel when the candles are new. Caroline and her ex-husband sat side by side at the window, not touching, both looking at a city that kept living. Between them, Lena drew circles on a napkin, red popsicle geography drying into maps. Then the monitor chirped its bored little alarm. Not an emergency, just a reminder that bodies are complicated. The pulse ox had slipped. I tightened the clip, watched the numbers climb like reluctant hikers, and felt the room's rib cage settle. Lena made a face. I hate that beeping, she said. It tells on me. I told her beeping was how the room knew to clap when she did something brave. She considered this, then stuck her free hand under the blanket and made a fist, like flexing for the machines. They refused to be impressed. She giggled anyway, and some essential stiffness in Caroline's neck eased by an invisible degree. Later, the sky broke into exactly the rain her father had predicted, slicking the parking lot into mirror and smudging the ambulance bay into watercolor. A facilities alert blinked on the nurse's workstation. Cooling fault in Zone C, PEDS wing. I pressed the intercom for maintenance. No answer. I half joked to Caroline that the vents had decided to nap just when our post-op needed cool air more than metaphor. Her ex-husband, HVAC on roofs, remember, stood, almost apologized for standing, then said gently that if someone pointed him to the thermostat, he could at least make sure the set point wasn't arguing with the sensors. I should have said protocol. I should have said liability. Instead I said, follow me, because sometimes repair is exactly the language someone brings to the room. At the nurse station, the thermostat sulked at 78, insisting it was 72. He didn't touch. He only read the panel the way you read another person's face when you've known them too long. He recommended we bypass the economizer, muttered about dampers that fail in place when tired, and gave facilities the vocabulary that got them to pick up on the second call. 10 minutes later, the vents breathed cooler. The room exhaled with them. He didn't grin. He just looked at the floor like a man who has finally found a step that holds his weight. Forgiveness lost another ounce. Back in room 4, the rain turned the window into a television tuned to weather. Lena was more awake now, that jittery bright that comes when children think sleep might make something important happen without them. She held the pendant up to her eye and pretended it was a telescope. She reported that through it the world turned gentle and a little blurry. Her father said that was how people looked when you wanted to keep them forever. She said then maybe we should keep everyone through it. He said that sounded like a good plan. Caroline watched both of them with that practiced stillness of women who have learned not to move while a miracle decides whether or not to land. The social worker returned with an itinerary that didn't feel like a sentence. An intake next Monday, a family session the Wednesday after. A school counselor looped in with care not to brand the child with a scarlet acronym. She suggested a simple ritual for going home. Objects can leave places if told how. The ritual was not mystical. It was 3 sentences said aloud while packing to go. We are leaving this room. We are taking what we need. We are leaving what we don't. Nobody said so, but we all knew which sentences belonged to whom. Toward evening, Lena's stomach complained, a small rebellion under neat dressings. She curled instinctively and met pain halfway. I checked her abdomen, soft enough, no guarding beyond the understandable kind, vitals steady but irritated. Nausea rose and fell like a tide. I set a basin within reach, the universal symbol of it's okay to be human here. Caroline looked like someone standing too close to a cliff. I said normal, common, expected, and for once the words did not feel like placards, they felt like handrails. The wave passed. Lena uncrossed herself. A cartoon resumed on mute, its bright, ridiculous faces moving without making promises. The hardest conversations rarely announce themselves. They begin with ordinary sentences that suddenly develop bones. Lena asked why he left. He said he thought leaving would make them safer from the piece of him that kept breaking things. She asked if the piece still lived in him. He looked at the speck cup and said it did, but now he kept it where it couldn't be swallowed. She asked if he could keep it there always. He said not alone. Caroline stared at the rain because raining is what skies do when someone needs a reason to look away. Lena nodded, serious as testimony, and asked if the 3 of them could be not alone together on Wednesdays. The social worker, who had remained to witness without being scenery, wrote that sentence down like a vital sign. A code bellowed 2 doors down, the kind that drags your attention by the collar, even when you know your patient is safe. Our whole wing held its breath the way teams do when another team is running the ball. It was not ours. It was still ours. You cannot work in an ER and believe that walls make separate stories. When the hush collapsed into voices, rhythms resumed, orders returned, the not deadness of someone made newly alive, room 4 applauded in its own quiet, private way. Lena squeezed the pendant until her fingers paled, then loosened, then laughed at herself for thinking her grip had anything to do with how the world had just turned. By night the building cooled into its metal bones. Caroline dozed in the pull-out chair, mouth parted, fist slack around a pen she had used to initial her way back to a future. The pen fell to the linoleum and didn't wake her. Her ex-husband sat vigil like a man studying for a test he wanted to pass. He fell asleep too, head bowed, breath even. Lena stayed awake longer than both, watching the shadow of the heart spin on the ceiling, a slow chandelier. I brought a blanket for him, set it over his shoulders the way you glue together what someone else cracked. He startled awake, then nodded thanks, then did a thing that will sound small on paper and weighed 1,000 pounds in that room. He stood, eased the blanket off, and tucked it around Caroline instead. He sat back down with none of the theatrical humility people perform when they want witnesses. He just did it and let it be over. At the end of the hallway, a vending machine hummed the same note it always hums, the ER's version of a drone in a choir. My break was 20 minutes late and exactly on time. He found me there, staring at an aluminum spiral that would not surrender a bag of pretzels. He offered $1 with a smile that knew it wasn't about pretzels. I waved it off. He leaned against the machine as if it were an old friend with broad shoulders and told me, not boasting, that he had been sober 312 days, which in the math of storms is a harvest. He took a coin from his pocket and rolled it across his knuckles, the way men teach themselves new dexterity to replace old reflexes. He said he did not deserve to be forgiven. I said nobody does, that's why it's called what it's called. He laughed a little and tucked the coin away. He didn't ask if I had kids. He didn't fill the air with his resume. He simply said he wanted to learn not to hand his daughter heavy things to swallow. When I came back to room 4, Lena had finally lost to sleep. The heart lay on the blanket beside her hand, not inside, not up on the sill, simply here. The rain slowed. The vents whispered their temperate lullaby. The monitor's green script kept writing its patient poem. Here, 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 here. Forgiveness settled lower in the bed, no longer a bag of coins, more like a warm cat pretending not to purr. I charted my end-of-shift note, the official one. Post-operative course, unremarkable. Pain-controlled, tolerating PO, plan for discharge in the morning, follow-up arranged, family conference held. Then I opened the notebook I do not submit and wrote what felt truer. Today a child learned that love can live beside you rather than inside of you. A mother learned that boundaries are also a form of care. A father fixed a room he did not break and asked to be allowed to keep fixing what he can. The glass heart did not shatter. That seems important. On my way out I looked back once. The cup on the sill reflected the city's tired lights. A smear of rainbow ran along the frame like a timeline made briefly kind. Tomorrow would involve paperwork and socks and a wheelchair ride to a curb that had seen too many kinds of departure. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, the ER, this sleepless, imperfect cathedral, held 3 people who were learning the weight of forgiveness and how to carry it together without handing it to a child to swallow. The elevator doors opened with their canned sigh. Somewhere below, an ambulance reversed into its dock, the long beep 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 like a metronome for the world. I pressed the button for the lobby and felt, for once, the building lift rather than sink. Tomorrow I would write the last chapter of this story. Tonight I let it rest, right where it belonged. Not in a stomach, not in a specimen cup, but in the space above a sleeping child's open hand. Morning broke with the kind of light hospitals never plan for. Gentle, honest, a color closer to hope than to hygiene. The night shift left in pairs, whispering promises of sleep, while day nurses walked in carrying coffee and determination. I came early. Some stories refuse to finish without a witness, and I wasn't ready to leave this one half told. Room 4 had changed overnight. The curtain was open, the tray table was stacked with folded clothes, the cup with the glass heart was gone, and the child on the bed was dressed, legs swinging, already waiting for the part where people start calling things normal again. Caroline was signing discharge papers. Her ex-husband, Daniel, I'd finally learned his name, was adjusting the straps of a borrowed wheelchair. Lena looked up at me. "You came back," she said, as if this were the test that mattered most. "I wanted to see how brave people leave hospitals," I said. She grinned. "Slowly." The paperwork parade began. Prescriptions, follow-up dates, a discharge summary printed in language designed to make miracles sound procedural. Stable condition, normal recovery, no foreign object detected. But between those sterile lines hid something luminous, the invisible note that read alive, forgiven, loved. Caroline folded the pages, tucking them into her purse the way people tuck worries they plan to revisit later. Daniel hovered near the door, restless, eyes flicking toward the vending machines down the hall. He wasn't running. He was pacing his new perimeter, the one made of accountability instead of absence. When the wheelchair was ready, Lena refused to sit until she'd seen where they'd put the glass heart. "I left it on the table," she said. I pointed to the nurse's station. "It's there, safe and cleaned. Can I have it back?" Protocol said no. Choking hazard, evidence chain, object of ingestion. But the rule book doesn't know about symbols. I looked at Caroline, who nodded once, then at Daniel, who nodded twice, then placed his recovery coin beside the heart on the counter. "Trade," he said. "Mine's metal, hers is glass. Both are about not breaking." Lena picked up the glass heart and turned it over in her palm. "It's warm," she said, surprised. "Things get warm when you hold them," I told her. "Then I'll keep it warm forever." The elevator chimed. Departure time. She climbed into the chair at last, small hands gripping the armrests like reins. Caroline pushed from behind. Daniel walked beside them. The wheels squeaked, a sound so ordinary it felt sacred. Every goodbye in an ER sounds like one of two things, the hush of finality or the whisper of renewal. This was the second kind. At the exit, she asked for one more stop. We turned left toward the waiting area, past the vending machine, the double doors, the bench that smelled of antiseptic and dawn. There, on the wall, hung a bulletin board cluttered with thank you notes, children's drawings, and anonymous postcards. Lena pointed to an empty corner. "Can I put something there?" I found a pushpin. She slipped a folded napkin from her pocket, the one she'd been drawing circles on the night before. She unfolded it and pinned it carefully, smoothing the edges. The napkin read, in careful block letters, "Thank you for fixing what hurt. Lena." Below it she taped the glass heart, secured with medical tape torn in two neat strips. Caroline gasped softly, but Lena shook her head. "It belongs here," she said, "so somebody else can use it when they forget they're strong." Daniel knelt beside her, eyes glistening. "You sure?" She nodded. "We have hearts at home." No one spoke for a long moment. Even the overhead speaker seemed to hold its breath before announcing the next code. Then Caroline reached down and touched her daughter's shoulder. "Ready, baby?" "Ready." They left through the automatic doors, sunlight spilling in behind them, rain-washed air curling through the entrance like the aftertaste of grace. The doors sighed shut, sealing the scent of coffee, iodine, and something sweeter that might have been peace. I stood for a while looking at that napkin and the taped heart. In a place that collects endings, someone had left a beginning. People passed by, glancing, smiling without knowing why. Later that day, a new emergency rolled in. A young boy, pale and frightened, clutching a stuffed dog with one eye missing. As I prepped the trauma bay, he stared at the wall of thank you notes. "What's that?" he asked. "Messages from people who got better," I said. He pointed at the taped glass heart. "Is that one magic?" I smiled. "Only if you believe that not breaking is magic." He nodded solemnly, as children do when they decide something will be true for the rest of their lives. When my shift finally ended, I passed the wall again. The glass heart caught the afternoon light, throwing tiny rainbows across the linoleum. Beneath it, someone, maybe a cleaner, maybe a patient, maybe no one, had added a new line in pen. Still beating. And for once, the hospital felt quieter than death, louder than life. Somewhere exactly between the two, where every heartbeat has a story and sometimes even glass remembers how to stay whole.